In the dead of winter, two adventurers spoke of a mercenary who had been raising hell on the battlefield, only to vanish once the fighting ended. Rumors claimed he was a prince from a fallen kingdom. That man, Yuri Bryal, is indeed the protagonist of this story. 10 years ago, the protagonist was an 18-year-old who enjoyed drinking and gambling in his free time. One evening, he insisted on playing another game, while his friend urged him to leave, warning they'd be late for their appointment. The two gamblers playing against him believed he was cheating and had swindled their money. Drunkenly, the protagonist denied it and claimed he was royalty. One of the gamblers scoffed, saying all royals were the same, entitled and useless. Offended, the protagonist declared he was the third prince of Bryal. With a smug grin, he proclaimed that his kingdom would be reborn by his own hands. In the next scene, the protagonist is seen secretly meeting with the imperial princess of the empire, Ekaterina Ivarna. She is furious because he arrived late. He offers a flimsy excuse, but she isn't fooled. In frustration, she throws off the necklace he had once given her. Refusing to hear more, she turns and walks away. The protagonist picks up the necklace, unsure of what to do next. From the shadows, an unknown figure watches and smirks with a sinister grin. From that day forward, the fragile balance between Bryal and the Empire began to shatter. Tensions escalated until the Empire launched a full-scale invasion. War broke out. As years passed and countless lives were lost, the conflict dragged on with no end in sight. Bryal's greatest military forces began to collapse, especially after the mysterious disappearance of the prince's father. The protagonist came to believe that Ekaterina had betrayed him, revealing all the secrets he had once confided in her. One day, she sent him a letter of apology. As enemy soldiers approached, they declared they would kill him and bring an end to Bryal's royal bloodline. They attacked, but the protagonist fought back with superior swordsmanship. Still, more knights arrived. Realizing he could no longer win, he accepted that death was inevitable. Then, one of his loyal guards stepped in and sacrificed himself, urging the protagonist to survive. Shocked and devastated, the protagonist cried out for his friend. Another guard pulled him away and yelled at him to escape. Reluctantly, the protagonist fled the battlefield. The next day, soldiers scoured the land for him. Hiding in an abandoned shack, the protagonist was eventually found by one of his remaining soldiers, who told him the coast was clear. Run. Survive. Rebuild Bryal. Avenge the fallen, the soldier urged. Eventually, everyone else perished. He became the last man standing. From then on, he lived as a nameless mercenary. One who wreaked havoc on battlefields in hopes that someone might finally end his suffering. One day, a man approached him amidst the carnage. He blamed the protagonist for everything that had happened. Calling him by name, the man removed his helmet. It was the protagonist's old friend, thought long dead. Without hesitation, he drew his sword and stabbed the protagonist through the chest. As he lay dying, the protagonist remembered his father's words. The blood of Bryal will never abandon its honor, even in death. The necklace he had worn all this time began to glow. Suddenly, the protagonist woke up, a child once more. The protagonist wakes up to the sound of his father calling his name, telling him that he had been asleep for 3 whole days. Confused, the protagonist is stunned. His father was supposed to be dead. Not knowing what to think, he smiles just from seeing his father again and says, "I've lived a long life." His father slaps him, not understanding the strange comment. The protagonist had thought he was in hell, but as he looks around, he realizes there are no sinners, no fires of purgatory, and no demons. He glances back at his father, then faints from the overwhelming confusion. As time passes, the protagonist gradually understands. He has regressed to the past and is now only 13 years old. He's been given a second chance at life. The next day, the protagonist is woken up by his maid, who urges him to get ready for sword practice. When he looks at her, he recalls her lifeless body from his past life. Knowing her death had been his fault, he asks her to slap him 3 times. She hesitates, questioning him, but he insists. She then slaps him hard enough to scare the birds away. During sword training, the protagonist spars with his teacher. He quickly notices that the teacher isn't taking him seriously. Frustrated, he asks the instructor to stop going easy on him. He wants to truly learn swordsmanship. The teacher smiles, unleashes his full strength, and begins real training. Moments later, the protagonist is lying flat on the ground, bruised and exhausted. But he's satisfied. For the first time, he feels hope that he can become stronger and set things right in this second life. Their training is suddenly interrupted by a maid, announcing that the protagonist's father wants to see him. Count Johannes' son has arrived in the kingdom. The protagonist freezes. In his past life, Count Johannes' son was the one who betrayed the kingdom. He was the one who opened the gates to the empire. With a cold expression, the protagonist asks, "Where is he?" The protagonist is eating dinner with his brothers and father, along with Count Johannes and his son. The protagonist displays exceptional manners, prompting Count Johannes to comment on how much he has changed, and that his own son should act accordingly. Johannes' son looks at the protagonist with disdain, and the protagonist meets his gaze with a cold sneer, making the Count's son uneasy. Sensing the tension, the protagonist's brother asks if there's bad blood between them. The protagonist replies, "Yes, and I plan to set things straight." He then challenges the Count's son to a duel. The duel begins. The protagonist blocks his opponent's first strike and kicks dirt into his face. He then tosses aside his wooden sword, charges forward, and lands a powerful kick to the Count's son's stomach. Picking up his sword again, he raises it to the boy's neck and says, "When you grow up, be a respectable knight." Then he offers his hand to help him up. The protagonist is determined to change the future and forge stronger bonds and better choices than before. The Count's son accepts his hand, and the tension between them dissolves. The protagonist's brother is impressed by what he saw. The protagonist assures him that he won't be causing problems anymore. He's changed. His brother is visibly shocked, and the protagonist offers a heartfelt smile, showing his sincerity. In the next scene, the protagonist finishes his swordsmanship training. The teacher informs him it's time to begin learning mana control. He offers to teach the protagonist the Brilliwan family method. However, the protagonist already learned this technique in his previous life, so he requests to study aptitude instead, something he hadn't mastered before. The teacher says another instructor, named Gerard, would be better suited to teach him. The protagonist remembers Gerard from his past life, an unmotivated knight who disliked training and ended up dying on the battlefield. Now, the protagonist is eager to pay the knight slacker a visit, and maybe knock some sense into him. In the next scene, the protagonist arrives at the knight's training ground. He tells the commanding soldier that he'd like to spar with some knights and asks him to fetch a wooden sword. The protagonist spots Gerard and notices that he's barely putting in any effort during training, which explains why he died in the protagonist's previous life. The commanding soldier asks whom the protagonist would like to spar with, and he points at Gerard. As the two face off, the surrounding knights grow excited to witness the match. The protagonist tells Gerard that he's going all out and wants to see what kind of knight Gerard truly is. The match begins. The protagonist attacks, Gerard blocks, and the protagonist continues to strike relentlessly. Gerard is caught off guard as the protagonist's speed increases. Pushing himself further, the protagonist begins attacking with more power. Gerard blocks and counters with an attack of his own. Although Gerard is bigger and stronger, being an adult knight, the protagonist is determined to land at least one solid hit. With quick reflexes, the protagonist deflects Gerard's sword and charges in at full speed, managing to land a blow. The surrounding knights are shocked that Gerard was hit. Angrily, Gerard infuses his wooden sword with mana and retaliates with full force. The protagonist narrowly evades the strike but still receives a cut on his head. Gerard snaps back to his senses, horrified by what he's just done to the third prince. The other knights are equally stunned by Gerard's reckless act. The protagonist wraps a bandage around his head and calmly tells Gerard to pick up his sword. He insists on continuing the spar. As they resume, exchanging blow after blow, Gerard realizes the protagonist is pushing himself beyond his limits. Despite the injury, the protagonist is genuinely enjoying the fight. Gerard begins to respect the protagonist and starts to enjoy their sparring session as well. They continue to exchange attacks, dodging and countering each other. Eventually, Gerard activates his mana-infused sword and breaks the protagonist's wooden weapon, winning the match. They shake hands, acknowledging that they both learned something valuable from the spar. Exhausted, the protagonist collapses to the ground, and Gerard rushes off to fetch him water and a bandage. The other knights who witnessed the match cheer for the protagonist. The captain of the Royal Knights arrives and sees the protagonist lying on the ground. He had already heard about the match from the other knights. The next day, in the kingdom, Gerard is walking when the protagonist suddenly catches him off guard. The protagonist tells him to follow. There's someplace they need to go. They approach a royal mage named Hernando. The protagonist tells Hernando that he'll pay off his gambling debts if he helps with a certain task. Hernando agrees, and Gerard witnesses the contract. The protagonist then explains to both of them that they're going to Sword Mountain. His goal: to raid the Founder's dungeon.